Thank you all so much for coming this evening. My name is Chelsea DiGiuseppe. I'm the Marketing, Communication, and Engagement Director for UNHInnovation. So the WildCatalyst seminar is open to everyone. It's designed to be a meeting place for innovators, both in the UNH community and the wider business community, so they can come together and learn about entrepreneurship, innovation, and commercializing research, as well as launching startup companies. So before I introduce our speaker, I just want to say thank you to our generous sponsors. We have Hamilton Brooks Smith Reynolds, and they're a Boston-based full-service intellectual property law firm. And Saunders and Silverstein, a law firm in Amesbury, Mass. That provides services related to trademark, copyright, internet software, and entertainment law. So following today's presentation, we just have some networking time where Beth will join us. You can have some more refreshments and beer. Just a reminder, if you are under 21, no beer. Tonight's speaker. Is there any students here?
You can have
So tonight's speaker is Beth Kahn. She's the Associate Director at the New England Regional Innovation Node at MIT, which is a part of the NSF-funded I-Corps program. Beth is a nationally certified NSF I-Corps Instructor and mentor with the MIT Venture Mentoring Service, and she works with innovators to explore commercialization of their research. She will be talking to us tonight about how to use customer discovery to evolve ideas, innovations, products, and services to fit the needs of actual customers. Beth?
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. How are you? Good? So let me, how many folks in here are researchers? Okay. Oh, that was like a maybe?
IT support for research? Oh, I'll half research.
Okay, you're half research.
I'm a researcher.
Okay. All right.
Back up.
Any faculty here? Okay. Of?
Mathematics.
Mathematics. Yes. Get a lot of startups out of mathematics.
Yes.
No, we'll figure it out. How about folks who have had a successful research-based venture launched, whether it be licensed or, yay. See, the math guy did. Okay, great, good. So, commercialization means getting it out into the world, whether it means you do a startup, it gets licensed, you get acquired, whatever that is. So I'm going to tell you about the customer discovery, because that was I was asked to talk about. So I thought I'd say, what and so what about it. Feel free to ask any questions, all right? So I might actually ask you questions, so it could happen. So who am I? This is me. I'm a mechanical engineer, got my master's at MIT, and I went to work at Bell Labs, working on a secure phone, amongst other things. I did a very short period of time as a rocket scientist. It was a nuclear weapon. It was a great summer job. But I've had a long career in telecommunications equipment, most recently at a company that was a startup in San Diego that made high-frequency point-to-point radios. If anybody's in the high-frequency point-to-point radio space, 76, 86 gigahertz. So it was a bleeding-edge use of technology. And so most of my career I have been a part of implementing new technologies into manufacture and use. So what is iCore? How many people have any knowledge of iCore? Ooh, look at that. So the most important thing about iCore is it's iCore, not iCorps, okay? Because English is a horrible language. So that's important to know because the NSF hates it when someone goes, I want to do iCorps. So what is iCore? It really is a program that is designed for complex engineering and technology-based ventures. And the bottom line is you want to avoid building something nobody cares about, especially after you've spent years and oodles of dollars. I had a foreign person say, what's oodles? No, it's fair, a lot. Because this years and dollars can be, millions and millions and years of time. So iCore really focuses on customer discovery, and it mitigates the risk of you doing that, right? And crying your little heart out. So the data shows that there's, why do startups fail? This is just startups, never mind, licenses and other things. Number one, building something nobody wants. I could argue that number 2, hiring poorly, 3, lack of focus. I could probably make an argument that that lines up with doing something that nobody wants. Or in the really technical way to say this, there's no there, right? So the NSF alone spends, it's probably closer to $9 billion a year in grants, and that's just one of 11 grant agencies that gives out SBIRs, STTRs, and research grants. Back in 2011-12, they said, how can we, increase the economic impact of these dollars? How do we improve the yield? So what they found is that when they looked at a lot of their SBIRs and STTRs, which these are small business innovation research grants, or tech transfer grants, sorry, they found that a lot of them, there was great technology and it worked, but it never got into the market. So no bueno. They want to change that. So they did that by adopting a lean startup approach, really for deep science or deep tech ventures. And it's based on some work by Steve Blank, who's out at Stanford, who has a fabulous, he must be fabulously wealthy beyond means by now. But it's based on this. And it uses something called a business model canvas. Anybody heard of that? Right, okay. And there are a lot of different kinds of canvas around. The beauty of something like this is it's a simple way to keep track. And as you learn new things, you have to adjust some of the other things, right? So I want to tell you who's my customer, right? Who it is I'm trying to serve with I-Corps and who the NSF is trying to serve. It's researchers who are really early stage, all right? They don't have to have the thing and a prototype and all that. We want it actually before that. Primarily PhD student postdocs and faculty, right? And we're really trying to get them to think about certain kinds of market questions, to think about the best path to market. And why that's important, and I'll come back to it, is not because all these researchers are going to be entrepreneurs and start businesses. We don't want them to do that, to be honest. What we want them to do is to be able to influence their research such that it's going to have a higher probability of having impact and being commercialized. Because they're really the only ones that can do that, right? I mean, I may be smart and everything else, but I can't, process all this learning and figure out how I'm going to change it. It does prepare these kinds of folks to participate in a local ecosystem. You guys have one here at UNH. There's one in the region. We have a national program, NSF does, that I'll talk about in a minute. But this is my technical expression again. It's like allowing these kinds of people to put a pinky toe, if you will, into entrepreneurship without it really being called that, and there's no pressure, and it's not business school, and we don't do business plans. It's really geared for the scientist and engineer. And we do kind of a prep school for going on to these national programs. So we really have two kinds of audiences, really, when we break that down. There are researchers that are just curious, all right? And we want those folks, all right? They're not planning to be an entrepreneur, like I said. They didn't go get their PhD and everything else to become an entrepreneur. And then there are researchers that are actually considering doing a startup, right, and pursuing an SBIR. So they're different kinds of folks. They're all welcome, and that's who we'd like to help. Another way to look at this, and I'm going to talk really about both of these, but the regional program, which is where I sit, and this is a chart that shows technology maturity, and there's a lot of ways to represent that. And then something, we used to call it entrepreneurial maturity, but it's really entrepreneurial commitment. Because we're interested in helping folks who are very low on that commitment level. I'm just trying it out. I just want to see what this is. And really early on, could be many, many years away, all right, from commercialization. And the I-Corps national program is a little further on, but things are still, there's still a lot of work to do with these kind of ventures. What we explain to folks is that, startups are really search organizations, right? They're not companies executing. So worrying about, space and people and, like equipment and all that kind of stuff, that's way too early. They really need to be searching, and they need to first decide and find out whether they have something customers care about, and then go validate that. So that's where we are addressing people, to the far left. Yeah. So I-Corps really it's a really practical process, that it depends upon people being clear about solving the problem of X. To articulate that for this person, not for an industry, for a person, right, in a certain role, who is trying to accomplish a certain job, right, or function. And the beauty of it is we ask people to guess, because they're going to be wrong, and we want you to be wrong. And you're going to test it, and the way it gets tested is you go out and talk to people. And customers in this case is like a big C customers. They can be users, payers, decision makers, influencers. Sort of think about the ecosystem and the workflow. Any questions? Because what I thought I'd do now is give you a taste of some of the process we go through in the sessions. Any questions, comments? Everybody's happy. Yes. Okay. So we have created a 3-step process to think about this. And the beauty of I-Corps, by the way, and the business model canvas and all that, from my standpoint, is it gives folks a structure to just kind of use to guide them through. Because if anybody who's been in a startup, it's so messy. It's messy, ugly, messy. And it's you get kind of off the rails a couple times. So we start out with identifying the customer, which is actually a really, really critical piece. We've created a framework for researchers, and I'm only going to take you a little bit of the way through it. But the reality is everybody comes in with a core technology, right? What was your core technology?
Signal processing.
Signal processing, okay. And what was yours?
Radios.
Radios. A man after my own heart, a radio guy. So there's a core technology, and people go, well, what problems do those solve? Now, most of us already have a problem in mind, right? Once you're working with a core technology. Signal processing and radio are great because I can do anything with those, right, at this moment. So we want to guide people through thinking about, well, okay, what problems can it solve? What industries have those problems, right? And then work the way down and keep going to subsegments and subsegments, depending on the industry, where they get to actually customer types. Who decides, who uses and who pays? Those are critical. So I'm going to use an example. My core technology is machine learning and AI, right? I could have put signal processing, right? And I would put blockchain, except I'm afraid to put that on. It intimidates me. But so I'm headed towards a portable ultrasound, actually. But my core technology is machine learning and AI. So I'm kind of skipping, so I don't want to walk you through every step. But the next kind of thing was, well, what are the applications? So the first two I came up with were, one is diagnosis, and the other was accuracy, right? I mean, those are two possible uses of machine learning and AI. And then we asked them to, okay, now think about who is that segment, right? Which industry? So I had identified defense and healthcare, right? These are still at too high a level, and that's what we're trying to get people to, come down, because when you ask them, we always ask who's going to buy and why. They'll go healthcare, oil and gas, right? Pharma. Well, the healthcare industry is about $4 trillion. I believe greater than the GDP of Germany. So to say I'm in healthcare is not sufficient. So who's the most likely customers within healthcare? We want people to think that through. All right, so, well, could be hospitals and first responders. And there's some logic about why I'm going to choose hospitals. But first responders, anybody had an ultrasound? Probably everybody. So I didn't choose first responders. I chose hospitals because first responders don't use ultrasound. What is in an ambulance is regulated by the government, local governments, state governments. And actually, because we live in this area, I'm a lot more comfortable with hospitals, okay? So at each step of the way, we ask them, you're making a guess, just put your logic down, right? Because there's some kind of logic and choice you make to begin with, right? Now remember, this is early on in technology. So I've chosen hospitals. The problem with hospitals is what? There are 6,000 hospitals in the United States, right? So we're trying to get people to be specific. So your hospitals, good for you. What kind of hospital? I mean, there's just so many. And healthcare may be one of the worst, but there are a lot of, all industries have their players. I don't know if this is worse or the government and military stuff might be a little bit worse as far as this goes. So I got to be clear on which kind of hospital, and I'm making assumptions all the way through. So I chose medium urban trauma hospitals. Again, I'm in the Boston area. I don't want to go for the biggest hospital. I don't want to go for the tiniest. They may not have budget. I'm making a guess. Maybe I snuck out and talked to somebody and had a little interview to get some insight. But I'm still not done. So I'm in the medium urban trauma hospital. What part of the hospital? Right? Well, I'm going to choose between emergency rooms and maternity wards because I know they use ultrasound in maternity wards. My colleague will say, who really cares about 2 heartbeats, 3 heartbeats, or 4 heartbeats? And of course I go, I do. Anyway, but the emergency is a more immediate issue, right? I have an expectation that there's, real issues in doing something quickly and identifying what's wrong with folks. So I'm choosing emergency rooms. So we drive them, in this case, once I get to an emergency room, all right, who do you think decides and pays for this? Right? Does this resonate with anybody? You probably use a different process, right? But we're trying to take people from I've got this great technology, and I'm going to cure blindness, or I'm going to do whatever the thing it is, and that's terrific. But we got to get it down to something specific so they can go out and actually talk to people, because you can't talk to pharma. I mean, you just can't. I mean, and people, it's like they don't think about it. And you guys keep in mind, right, we're talking about folks who have spent, 20 years, whatever the number of years in school, really honing their expertise in their subject matter expertise, right? This is a little different for them, and that's fine, right? But they catch on quick, I can assure you. So once we drive folks to identify who's the customer segment, right? And again, these are all guesses, and they may have multiple ones they want to try out. So with your signal processing, you probably had lots of choices about what application and what problem you were going to solve, right? Do you remember what the 2 favorite ones were?
Well, the original thing we were going for was improved audio quality on cell phones.
Okay, great. What was the second problem you were looking at, or the other choice?
Doing music downloads to cell phones.
Now you see how different those are. He might say they're really the same because it uses the same signal processing.
That's totally
okay. The reality is the world of who decides and pays and all those things, those are very different for those different customer segments. All right? So the next part in this step is, well, why don't you let's take those people and understand the jobs they're doing. Okay? So it's not good enough just to finally get a job title. What the hell do those people do? Right? So we identified these 3 types of customers, within our customer segment, 3 types of customers. So we asked folks to guess what's the job they're doing. And some graphic here, but the picture of the ER resident, who lovingly sometimes is called a postdoc with a knife, is the picture of their world is, right, they're a doctor, they get a lot of patients, some of them cranky, they get burnt out a lot, they got to do a lot of flipping paperwork, even though it's like this, but it's paperwork. And they get evaluated by observation, okay? So if I go to an ER director, an ED director, anybody have any ER management experience in the room? So it's interesting, they do look at patients per hour. In addition to patients per hour, they look at something called a revenue equivalent value, which I said, whoa. Yeah, whoa. I mean, you know, some of these things you just kind of lift up a little bit and you go, oh shit. But they do. They're watching money. They're looking at, you know, how they're being evaluated and scorecards, all right? And they want a very efficient emergency room. The purchasing person, on the other hand, is at the end of the day trying to balance time and money. They got to have the right stuff available at the right time, and they ought to have it at the right cost. Okay, so these people have doing completely different jobs, and they're all working on behalf of the emergency department. Right? And so, you know, these again are guesses at this stage, right? Because most folks anywhere, never mind researchers, really don't know the people they intend to serve, what they do and what they're measured by. They really don't. So we then scoot along and say, okay, we've identified a customer segment and some customer types, and we have some guesses about what they do, how they're measured. So now let's figure out a value proposition, because if I put it in here again, but that business model canvas, two of the most important blocks on there are who's the customer and what's the value to them. There are a lot of other things on there like channels and relationships, but the core of it is looking at those two because that's product market fit, and if I don't have that right, forget about it. I don't care what you do with everything else. So we want to design a value proposition. And so it really has to do with how does the customer, what does the customer define as success? And really it needs to be in the customer's words, not your words. I'm just picking on you because you're a math guy and you're sitting right here. That's good. It's perfect. So you know, if you're going to improve the quality of was it cell phone signals? What did you say?
Voice on cell phones.
Voice on cell phones. So the customer that you're going after, there's an end user, me, right? There's the cell phone supplier, there's the equipment people. You know, what is it they're trying to do, right? In their own words and how they measure it is we want them to make these assumptions. So all of these things are assumptions. They should plan to be wrong. They will be wrong. We want you to be wrong. This is the only time a researcher is allowed to say, I don't know. Probably in their life, you know, or their world. We want you to, if you don't know, say you don't know. So it usually comes up as, what about my technology? I have the best signal processing in the world. I'm sure you do. I have the best linker to go for an antibody conjugate drug, right? I got that. Well, the reality is, and bluntly, nobody cares what your technology is, right? You're solving a problem for them. But the other things we try and explain to them is, you know, if you're out there talking about your technology, you ain't listening to them, all right? And we do recognize that most researchers, their world is going out. You do papers, you make presentations, you're trying to get collaborations, you're talking about your tech, right? We don't want that. So a couple of things that'll happen, besides you're not really listening, is what if you walk into somebody and that's not what they need, right? You've talked about your great signal processing and they need, you know, ear clips, whatever they need. That's bad. What if they view your technology negatively and then you want to maybe come back into them and they go, oh, that guy's got the, you know, whatever it is. But the real big issue is you're just biasing the whole conversation. And the interviewing that I'll go into in a minute is a real practiced art. And we have them start with 12 interviews, but you really need to do lots and lots of them. So I like this little cartoon. It's like what you want to say is this big bubble. What they're interested in is this bubble. And, you know, there's only this little bit of overlap, right? And you have to recognize that. So we've taken them through, you know, what's the customer segment and the type? What do you believe is the benefit to them? Now we want you to get the hell out of the building. Go talk to people. People not like you, right? Absolutely not. And this puts people tremendously out of their comfort zone. And it's important that they get out of their comfort zone because they can't learn this stuff by reading articles and journals. You just can't. So we tell them, why are you doing this? Well, obviously to learn things you don't know, right? And then understanding, you've got all these assumptions, you want to test them. I think you care about voice quality on blah, 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 right? Well, maybe that type of person doesn't, but that one does, right? And I need to figure that out. We offer guidelines on questions. So these are very different kinds of questions than one normally asks. They're open-ended, probing questions to kind of get about the process and action and why and how you do something versus, your opinion or what do you think? What kind of signal processing do you need, right? I'm just saying that we all come from this kind of mindset when we've created something, and that's what we want to talk about. So we go through what makes a good question and a bad question, and then we talk to them about the weighted interview. We want you to do it in person, all right? Because you can see body language. The second best is video conferencing. And I always tell them the phone is worse. This is me. This is my martini. This is my cell phone. I'm on my couch and I'm watching my dog. All right? And you're there being all serious. I mean, it's exaggeration, but the point is get in front of actual humans, all right? And that is a very big growth opportunity for most folks. They haven't done that before. I don't know you already. I don't know what's going to happen in this conversation. So in reality, what we're having folks do is go through a cycle, right? They come up with a set of assumptions and hypotheses, and then we ask them to think about, well, what is it you want to know and why, and who are you going to talk to? Create those questions that are not biased, which is a challenge. And then go conduct the interviews and then synthesize, and after you've done a couple, and just keep going around, because they keep learning and they're going to change. Their assumptions will change. Their customer segments may change, right? And so you just keep going. And you grow with every turn. And most people, as they go through a couple of these, actually enjoy it, right? I mean, they find that, this is actually not, have you done it?
Yeah. 2 years ago.
2 years ago, did you do the local program or the national program?
The local program here.
And how many customers did you talk to? I'm going to put you on the spot.
About 25 to 30 at least.
Excellent. And how were those first couple of interviews?
Impossible.
Impossible?
Impossible to make sure I was asking the right questions. And then as we went through with the program, it changed drastically. We also started recording them later on.
You mean?
We're video recording our interviews.
Video, audio?
Video.
Oh.
Because that way we could go back through.
So, by the way, we don't advise that. Just so you know.
Only at the end.
No, but I'm just saying. So because, once you tell somebody I'm recording you, first of all, depending on which state you're in, you're going to get permission. Oh, it's serious. I'm not kidding. But so it takes practice to do these. It takes practice to not ask a question with confirmation bias in it. I mean, and so as I've been working with this stuff for a couple of years now, I realize how polls, I don't care whether it's a political poll or it's another poll, you tell me the answer you want and I can ask the questions. And they can sound like they're really like right down the middle, but they're not, right? So it takes a lot of practice not to basically create what you want to hear. That's not good. So that gives you a taste of the kind of things we have them go through, both in our short course, and I'll describe the how it's arranged, and also the national program, right? So this is experiential stuff, right? You look at some videos, you get to make some assumptions, and then out you go. And then there's support for you as you think about it, right? You come back after those first interviews and go, oh my God, those were so shitty. And we tell them, your first ones are not good. Just don't worry about it. And don't go see the CEO of the best company you've ever wanted to talk to in your first 4 interviews. Please don't, right? Probably shouldn't be talking to a CEO anyway. Any questions on the kind of general approach? Because that is the core of it. Making assumptions about these things and going out and testing them. Those of you who've been through it or teach it here, have I missed anything in the general, no? What I've found is that these tools are very simple. They're very straightforward to say and explain, but doing them is just a different thing. So we were doing a Spark session, and I'll tell you what that is, Tuesday night in Southern Maine, in Portland. And we had a bunch of clinicians in there from Maine Medical and a big variety. And a woman who has been through I-Corps many years ago is leading some innovation effort. But when she looks at getting down to that customer type, she goes, this is hard. I thought I got to really think about this because I didn't realize all these assumptions I was making. So it's deceptively simple. So we have a regional program. Now, let me say that University of New Hampshire has a site program that they've run twice a year here that is designed slightly differently than the one we do regionally, but covers the same topics. The format's a little bit different, but it covers that. That's what's your name? Francesco went through. So we have a regional program that and in fact I hope we're going to be offering up here to a wider audience, where we ask you to do 12 interviews. And then if people kind of like that, remember now we're talking about researchers, they may not like this, or they may say it's not for me right now. But if it is, you can do 12 more interviews, and we provide a small micro grant for you to go visit somebody, go to a conference, right? Some dollars for you to do that. And once you do those 24 interviews, we makes you eligible to apply to the national program, which I'll talk about. So our program is designed for this 3-week interval, 2 workshops, 2 office hours. And it's interesting, you might say it's really short, and it is short, but I can tell you we've done this as an 8-week program. We did it as a much longer program, and the results are similar. I didn't believe it at first, but they are actually similar because I'm the one who did the surveys. And then we've got the Fusion program. So this national team program, these are done in places across the country, and they run them, 12 to 14 times a year. You apply to this program, to the NSF. It's a grant program. You get up to $50,000. And you participate in this 7-week program that they have. So they have a couple days at the front, a couple days at the back, and every week there's a webinar. And you're going through that whole canvas. So not just customers and value proposition channels, revenue, blah, 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 blah. The emphasis, though, stays on the customers and the value proposition. You have to do a minimum of 100 interviews in that 7 weeks, right? And it sounds really hard, but once you get into it, you realize there's a whole bunch of people you can talk to. And the money is non-dilutive. I mean, it's intended to be used for customer discovery, not for product development and other things. So there's some direct benefits of participating in the national program. You get a better business model. There's a little bit of a pressure test of kind of like where you're headed. You get money to talk to people. For me, that's cool. You meet a lot of interesting people. I mean, once you start getting out there and everything, some people really go, wow, this is really sweet. I can learn a lot of stuff in a short period of time. And let's not minimize, it increases your chances for getting an SBIR or STTR by a bunch. And the reason for that is, if anybody in here done an SBIR or an STTR, there's a section that says broader impacts. Right? And it's really asking you to describe, in a way, who cares and why. I'm oversimplifying it, but it really helps them fill it out. So in New England, since we've become a node, we've had, you see the statistics, 250 teams go through these short course programs. Some companies created many. I don't know what that 47 is. 220 million raised, lots of jobs created. We try to track all this stuff, by the way, and I'm sure, Beth, you guys have the same problem. It is really hard to track. Once they leave the nest, out they go, and it's just, and it doesn't happen instantly. People don't just do this program and then bam, off. Things happen. They go back to school, they're doing this, they're doing that, and other things occur. But the results are good. I want to emphasize the outcomes are way more than thinking about creating startups. And so this down below, this data, we've done survey after survey after survey, and as I mentioned, we had a very long program and then an 8-week program and now the 3 weeks. And honestly, all these folks learn new things. It influences how they think about their research, recommended to others, and a big thing is it builds a lot of self-confidence. Anybody who goes to this national program, you see a unbelievable transformation from the beginning, the first week, to the 7th week. We even see that sometimes in the 3-week program. I have seen folks get up and they're not even able to speak in front of the group. You know, you want to go hug them because they're just, fall apart. 3 weeks later, they're up there talking. And it's like, what? Oh, I had to go talk to other people. I realize I actually know something, and anyway, it's an amazing thing. It does help folks think about their career path. Right? I mean, many a researcher I've talked to decided, I don't want to stay in academia. I want to go into industry. Or that isn't for me. That's all good too, right? So these happen to all be from MIT, but we're going to start putting more and more and more from all around the region in. But I'm not going to go through each one, but each group has their own path, of course, right? This was a PhD student who went through in 2016 and then, just proceeded right through, became one of the first investments out of the engine in Cambridge. It's a VC, but focused on, tough tech kind of stuff. And their story is interesting. They have this nanofilter membrane for industrial processes. When they started out, they were all in some kind of special chemical stuff. And they went and did these interviews and found out the real problem was with dairy farmers and milk. Was never known to them, wasn't on the horizon. It wasn't even a possible application. But that's where the biggest need was. This one is, it says microfluidic device, blah, blah, blah. It's actually electroporation. You know about synthetic biology. Take a cell, make it open up, put some DNA or RNA in it, close it up, and off you go. I happen to have been with this team when they went through the national program. So it took a little more time. They got a grant. This TT grant is for while you're still on campus. And then they also wound up at the engine. And the guy on the right's a flippin' postdoc who had a job offer at a consulting company and turned it down to pursue this. And the PI Cullen, was not yet tenured. He got tenure. So, I mean, you wouldn't have expected necessarily these folks to make this kind of commitment. Another one, PhD student now at Argonne Labs. You talk to any of these people, lots of stuff helped them get where they are. It wasn't just this, but this was very helpful and informative to them. One more, this one, I don't really like this one, to be honest with you, because it's so atypical. I actually, he came in to talk about iCore. I talked to him. He's got this augmented reality. He takes his cell phone out, because I go, what is this? Because we don't really talk about the tech. And he holds it up, and he shows like there's a bowl of fruit, and then there's this little thing hopping around the fruit, and I'm thinking, who cares? All right, this is why I'm not a VC. Wound up going through iCore, went to this Y Combinator, raised money out the door, was acquired by Pokemon. Byam! I mean, that's kind of rare. So that's why I don't really like that one. But like I say, I would be so poor if I ever was trying to decide which were the right things to invest in. I'm just terrible. So there's a number of, as I mentioned, it's more than about creating the startups, because that isn't the primary measure of what we're looking for. And that's what I have for you guys. So I hope that what I've done is, what is customer discovery, as that we use that language. How is it used with folks, and what does it do for them? It's exceptionally powerful. It's really amazing. So, can you attest to this? I didn't pay him. I don't, right? I might. No. Does it help?
Yeah, I think it really helped.
Yeah. It's a way to think.
It made major changes. When we started interviewing again, we had majorly biased questions of, hey, what do you think about what I worked on? What I worked on? I'm asking you a question about myself. You're not going to tell me you don't like it.
Right.
Noticing all these small things, going over the training with this, deciding how to conduct interviews, have the questions prepared early, but not necessarily read off script 100%.
Right.
Makes it natural, and you get genuine information out of it.
The ultrasound, portable ultrasound thing, when we go through the course, we use some examples of like good questions and bad questions. So this ultrasound portable is supposed to be able to increase the number of patients you can see in the emergency room, and certain things be faster. So one of the examples is we're going to interview an ER nurse. And so I go through here's kind of what happens when you come in and wind up getting an ultrasound. Most of you wait, right, as a patient. But I'm going to talk to the ER nurse, and one of the questions I ask is, why does it take so long to do ultrasounds, scans, right? That question is so loaded, right? It's so loaded. It's so negative. Anyway, and then we talk about a different type. And then my favorite is asking the ER nurse, what would she do to increase the volume of patients by 30%? Yes. Do you think the ER nurse is excited for that? No, I'm just saying. So, I know it sounds so, but we get so stuck on our solution and we're trying to push people to the solution. But anyway, that's what makes this really fun for me, because you get to meet people like Francesco and you get to see this, thing go on in their head. Anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Is the training publicly available?
If you are a researcher with typically something STEM related, you can apply. So I'm just saying, we target folks at research institutions, but there are folks sometimes who are alum or other things who have access to IP. They're welcome to apply.
And if you're part of the UNH community in any way, our program is open to you.
Yes?
I don't know if this is part of the regional or national things, but I went through the local one. And you didn't mention like a business mentor as part of that team. I don't know if that's part of the other program, but they have that at UNH. And, our team found that incredibly valuable, not just in the interview, but to have someone totally outside of our world,
right.
Who is a website, we had a website, and he was just, gave very in-depth coaching that was, I still think about the perspectives that he had were just totally different from our world here at the university.
That's great. To answer your question, as a part of our short 3-week course, there's groups of 5 or whatever, teams are assigned to an instructor, and that's the person you have office hours with through that 3 weeks, right? But we're really focused on the process, not the product. At the national program, you have to have at least 3 people on a team. They call it an entrepreneurial lead, a technical lead, and then an industry mentor. So they actually have an industry mentor with you over the 7 weeks, right? To a bunch of things, trying to help you get the interview, give you some of that kind of feedback. Oh, I think that's a terrific thing. Yeah, it's helpful.
I would suspect probably everyone agrees that I probably went through the worst version we could hear at UNH because it was the first version. So the first cohort.
No, that's called a beta.
A beta.
It's not the worst.
And I think that all of the questions you asked prove 2 things. One, even in the worst version of potentially.
Edit this out.
It was really good. I mean, there's a lot of things learned in it. There's
right.
a lot of, it's overwhelming. It's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stress in doing it because you're still doing your other job.
Correct.
And there's a ton of things I think about still from that, which was years ago now, right? The other thing that is interesting is I would say the same answer to all your questions that 100% of people say all those things, which just makes your point that you know how to ask good questions that you know the answers to. When we did we had an 8-week program, we had 3 workshops, and the middle workshop was
dedicated to interviewing, and you just have to go try it. And to get feedback from your mentor, you can't just tell people that it's the class. That's hot. That's hot. That's hot. It's hot. You can't just tell them. They have to go try it, learn, get the feedback.
And
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way you're ever going to break that thing when the first interviews are crappy.
But that's okay.
Because you haven't taught them anything yet. You come in day one, go do interviews. Okay, what do? I don't know, just go do interviews.
The first 4, though, by the way, the first 4 are more about reaching out to contact people you don't know, arranging to talk to them, and going to actually see them. Not so much what you're actually asking and learning, to be perfectly honest. All right? This is I'm looking at my shoes or your shoes kind of introverts sometimes, and that's huge. How are you going out and talking to strangers? It's a natural for you.
I was trained by others before I went out. But you touched on a couple of things. When you first go talk to the customers, they may tell you that what you want to do isn't going to fly, and you have to completely revamp it. So, for example, you asked me about improving audio quality.
Mm-hmm.
We talked to all the phone companies. They said they didn't care about the audio quality because they made the money anyway. And so they said...
And that's just so wrong. When you're a logical
they had
scientist, it's wrong.
On the network.
Yeah.
And so they could make just as much money with bad quality as with good quality. And so they sort of forced us to try to do the first media downloads. And the infrastructure didn't even exist. So you get that feedback. It's a good time to decide whether you still want to do it, which I didn't do. But they can really direct you different ways.
And it saved years. No, it did. If you hadn't have done it or you hadn't have listened, you'd still be trying to do. So telecom. Back when they charged per minute, they wanted all kinds of stuff that made you stay on longer. Now that model, remember, how many, you probably don't, long distance charges. I'm just saying, it's like the whole world has changed. Anybody have any other questions or comments? Yes?
I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about, sometimes you might have a technology there that can solve a great noble problem, but it also could just enhance a music or gaming experience.
Mm-hmm.
How would you address that? Is there like a falling off point where the less noble solutions are going to just try to grub for money in some other channel, or?
For this episode of the 3 weeks or 6 weeks or even the 7-week program, we're trying to get folks just to understand the basic tools and techniques, and at the end be thinking about, is this something I want to continue to pursue? What you're talking about, sort of a little bit further down, it's like once I have some data, because this is evidence-based, not emotionally based, honestly, then I got to think, where is my first market, right? Maybe it isn't the place I really want to be, where it's a big humanitarian impact. I'm just saying, you got to figure out where's the right place to go. And even if it is a humanitarian thing, who is it I go to? Who's going to be the buyer, the user, and the decision maker? It gets messy, right? So we're not making judgments on those type of things, and we're not. How many people here are affiliated with the business school? Okay, apologize for this in advance. We're not making any judgments on the value of the business whatsoever. All right, there was one small piece where we asked people to think about market size, but it isn't from the point of view of judgment. It's like, who is that? What?
He left. So.
Well, okay, we'll turn it off. We'll say, I'm not coming home tonight. We ask people to think about market size more in the context of is the view worth the climb? That's all, right? It's so far from actually making those business decisions. One last thing, there are a lot of folks who are trying to solve really big problems. And unfortunately, the old, how do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time. So the hard part is figuring out where, who cares the most right now, who has the biggest problem right now. It's hard.
Do you think there's a natural bias for the entrepreneur or the engineer who's got an emotional, perhaps financial attachment to their idea to be doing the interviews at all, even if they're properly asking the right questions and set up, or would somebody with that background and well-educated be, more neutrally able to get?
They might, but evidence shows that the people who are directly involved in the thing, whatever it is, are the ones who really need to hear and learn how to do that. Because there's a bunch of other things that can happen. If I go talk to people for you, first of all, I'm filtering it back to you, number one. Not even on purpose, but I'm filtering it back to you about what I think is most important. And like I said at the beginning, you're the best one to be able to integrate this stuff and decide what you might want to change. In a research line that's 6 years, 5 years, 8 years, right? I can't do that for you. No, you need to learn how to be more open-minded and less biased. It actually helps you everywhere, right? Once you learn how to do this. Anything else?
I figured out how to shut off.
I say we have fun. Do some texting.
I have one other
Yeah.
follow-up on what you were saying about finding out who needs it, who pays for it. A lot of times you get into a situation where one group really needs it, but the money is in somebody else's budget. And the earlier you can find that out, the easier it is to avoid the trap. Actually, I shouldn't say that. You're always trapped in that situation.
But eyes open is helpful, knowing that. By the way, patience. So many folks come into the program and who's the user and the payer? The patient. Patients in this country seldom have any influence on anything. All right? I mean, not always, but right? And so that's like completely wrong. Right? I got to figure out how they get that information. Do they need a prescription? Do they, whatever it is. But thank you for that. That's true. Yes, sir.
Just make an observation, Beth. Maybe you mentioned this earlier when I wasn't in the room, but when you think about the canonical NSF I-Corps, you think about hard tech, tough tech, squishy biotech, right? But if you take the word technology out of it and you insert idea, it becomes applicable to everybody. And it's not just, and I know we have folks in Extension that are here and folks that might not be working with technologies, but more with social sciences or liberal arts and things like that. This is applicable to bringing a new product to market or allocating research dollars or just being able to talk about your idea in a way where people will want to engage with whatever you're doing. So just don't think that this is just about technology.
Yeah, so that's a fair point. And the struggle I have, because I'm in the node, we are funded by the NSF. Our target audience are researchers. I know everybody can benefit from this, right? Everybody. I mean, tech, non-tech. But it absolutely is helpful. I mean, there's nothing like somebody asking you, how do you know that? People just say stuff. How do you know that, right? I mean, they mean well, but it's like, well, let's go find out. Let's go find out really how this works. It's a devastating moment to find out nobody cares about that thing. Voice quality. Idiots. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. I hope this gives an idea of what this is about. You have a program here. First of all, if anybody knows some folks that ought to be doing this, feel free to forward them on to Beth, the other Beth. And then, if there are folks who are interested in getting involved, we look for instructors who participate in these programs. Right? We have some trainees here, right, to participate. So thank you very much.